welcome to another Doctor's Assistant 1 video, and today I'm doing a video on the 4th Doctor Adventure Series, Series 1 overview. So I'm going to go through each of the episodes in the first series, give you a brief summary of what I thought about them, and then my rating of that episode and or story. And yeah, well, basically I've done a review of each of these episodes individually, so it's more, as I said before, just a sort of overview of the series, what I liked, what I didn't like from it, what was the best episode, what was the least, sort of good episode in my opinion, and yeah, what I thought of the series overall. So yeah, first of all, you start off with Destination Nerva, episode 1, you can see that there, episode 1, Destination Nerva. I think, from what I remember in retrospect now, actually, it sort of reminds me of the most recent sort of episode in series, or one of the more recent episodes in Series 10 being Empress of Mars. It kind of reminds me of that story where it's sort of rather patriotic and, you know, sort of Britain, like Victorian Brittany stuff at the beginning. It's a spiritual successor to, or successor and or sequel to Ark in Space. It's kind of got a zombie bit of a vibe, you know, like a zombie bit in like Oxygen as well. And it's got the 4th Doctor and Leela in it, so if that interests you at all, then it would probably be one to buy. It retails for $10.99 on Big Finish website. It's the first episode in the 4th Doctor's sort of brand new series of sorts. An hour-long episode. These are all hour-long episodes that are split up into 2 parts, 30 minutes each. I think for me it was a bit too, I don't know, like a bit too many ideas, you know, with the patriotic stuff. Then you've got, as I say, it sort of having to tie in Ark in Space. Then you've got stuff about, you know, the zombie stuff sort of thing right at the end. And then you've got, fourthly and lastly, and probably the best thing, the sort of idea of the overall story arc for this series, which is that the 4th Doctor will actually try and or educate Leela's character in Louise Jameson's character of Leela in this series. So it gives it it's a solid foundation there for the series, but I think individually as a story on its own, I think it's not the best story, unfortunately, but that's just me personally. And I ended up giving it a 6 out of 10. So yeah, Destination Nerva. The second episode here we have is The Renaissance Man, a sort of written by Justin Richards. The previous one being was written by Nicholas Briggs. This is a sort of how to describe it, sort of theme park of like sort of with lots of from what I remember of it, like a theme park for the intellectually learned men of sorts, yeah, intellectually bright people and that, and it gives a more sort of shines more of the light on Tom Baker's Doctor in particular, of being more sort of intelligent than how he usually is portrayed in the TV series. And I kind of respect that, because if you remember, Jon Pertwee's Doctor was rather the sort of scientific person, but I think because of the fact that Tom Baker's biggest contrast in that was that he was very humorous and or eccentric and mad. I think a lot of people, it was done and played so well and or to such a degree that I think it almost, when he was being intelligent in the show here and there are glimpses of that, I think people still just, it overshadows, or his humour and eccentricities overshadow his intellect. But here the Doctor is very intellectual, and it very much closely links to, as I say, the overall story arc is set up in the previous story, with, yeah, sort of the whole sort of, you know, theme park of sort of, and museums and sort of state sort of places of, you know, intellect, and, you know, you've got Spitfires and really sort of, you know, collectible, you know, antique sort of stuff that are rare collectibles amongst these intellectually, yeah, smart people, or intellectual greats, even, and yeah, and I just like Tom Baker in this one. He shines in this one, in my opinion, and I enjoyed the story. Overall, I give that a 7 out of 10. So an improvement of Destination Nerva. episode 3 now, so we're halfway through the series. You have the Wrath of the Iceni. What can I say about this that hasn't probably already been said? It's written by John Dorney. It's a superb story. It's my first experience of a pure historical, so I was rather nervous and or dubious to sort of listen to this one, but it really sort of blew me away. It was really well written, really epic, really, dare I say, epic, but it goes from epic sort of scope of like these big battles and this sort of grand scope of like the Roman legions and this and that, but then it kind of can zoom back in into sort of what classic Doctor Who did best, which is the bits where like the Doctor and Leela are tied up and there's someone else trying to cut the rope and then they have to escape and that. And although it's not got any aliens in and all stuff like that, I really enjoyed it. Neither does Renaissance Man, which I think was one of the biggest criticisms of that story. But really good character piece as well for Leela's character. It can only really work with Leela's character. She fits perfectly with the time period. Boudica as a character is really superb. It's really interesting to see Leela and Boudica sort of characters sort of spar it out and or challenge each other and make clear their ideologies. And at first Leela does agree with Boudica, but then you start to see actually the cogs turning, and from the previous two stories and or Leela's experience before those two stories, so Renaissance Man and Destination Nova, she has been exposed to the Doctor and his way of thinking, and Destination Nova and or maybe even the Renaissance Man, she refers to him quite often as the wise one or something like that, and this is really where she becomes the wise one, I think, well, something to sort of say about this, that isn't a bad thing, but Tom Baker does take a back seat, and he almost plays a sort of William Hartnell 7th Doctor-esque and or David Tennant-esque in like Fires of Pompeii-esque role of sort of being like, I can't affect this time period, I can't do stuff because it's it's a fixed point in time and that, which I don't think they ever had Tom Baker's Doctor ever do something like that in his run. Granted, I don't think most of his run was set ever in history, really, besides Mask of Mandragora that I can think of. But even then, I think that had a bit of alien stuff there. So a really, really good character piece. Really just come on. It's got the Fourth Doctor riding a horse. Either that or Leela riding a horse. One of those two people riding a horse. That's pretty cool. In the countryside of sorts. It for Series 10 sort of point of reference, the best way of describing this is probably it's most like, say, the Eaters of Light, but done in an hour-long episode of like the Eaters of Light, so it gives way more time to develop and breathe and that, and it feels better because it is a classic series, episode of sorts, or done more sort of with the classic Doctor and or companion dynamic and being given the time to develop in that, instead of, like, say, the Eaters of Light, where it sort of fell flat a bit, I think, because of the 45-minute, time slot it had, whereas this takes full advantage of the hour-long to give a really well-rounded character piece for Leela. Number 4, I can't really say much about episode 4, Energy of the Daleks, the second episode to be written by Nicholas Briggs. I can't really think of much to say about this one because I haven't listened to this one in a long time, so it's the first and only Dalek story in this series, which I'm kind of grateful about, because obviously, if you know me, I really like the Daleks, but they are very much overused. Oh, I didn't actually tell you what rating I would give Wrath of the Iceni. I gave it a 8 out of 10, really good character piece for Leela. Anyway, Energy of the Daleks. I can't really remember much about it, but I enjoyed it from what I remember of listening to it and or rewatching my review for this video. It's a Dalek story. It's without Davros as well, which is quite interesting because if you remember, in Tom Baker's era, there was only Genesis and Destiny of the Daleks even, and those two both feature Davros, so that was quite interesting. It gives me a sort of Bells of St. John vibe meets, say, something like Victory of the Daleks, you know? So Daleks in sort of modern day London, so almost like the Daleks invasion of Earth, but in today's sort of time period. And yeah, I mean, I can't really say much about it, so I'll just give you the rating here. 8 out of 10, I gave it, so yeah. Dalek Story, it's a good one. Number 5, you've got Trail of the White Worm, which I listened to yesterday to prepare for the next review that I'd need to do, and I really enjoy this one. It's a nice sort of world building episode. It's decent. You know, Tom Baker's good as usual, as always. It's written by Alan Barnes. It's a good episode. Leela's good in it. Spiltonton. I can't. No, actually, you know what? I'm not gonna say his name. I can't pronounce the army general guy, but there's this guy who's like very patriotic, and he kind of reminds me of the character from the Sea Devils, but surprisingly enough, he gets manipulated by the Master. Jeffrey Beavers here. Wow, Jeffrey Beavers, I think plays the Master a bit sort of, I don't know, he doesn't go over the top. He plays it, you know, sort of low key, which makes it more menacing. Like, there's a bit apparently where one of the people who, you know, is like, you know, like keeping him in this cave is like, but dude, why are you talking to the wall? And then he like turns around and says, oh, he's like there saying like, well, I'm talking to the wall because it would give me more of a stimulating conversation and that, and it's like, you know, and I don't know, he's very in control of his sort of menace and that, and I think that makes him more scary because you're just waiting for him to have like an outburst of, you know, of a mental breakdown. It reminds me of Battlefield. Whether or not that's a good thing or not, I don't know. Seventh Doctor story. It's yeah, it's a decent one. It's a decent world builder, but there's nothing too stand out. The cliffhanger at the end of this story is fairly decent as well, which leads into the next one. The worm, in retrospect, I think is actually fairly decent, actually decently portrayed here. I know in my review I said the worm wasn't, but I actually, after re-listening to it, yeah, I like the worm quite a bit, actually. And I could keep track of it a lot better on a second listen. Yeah, it's a bit interesting. But I still stand by the rating of giving it a 7 out of 10. So yeah. And then the Osirian Adventure, I want to say, by Alan Barnes as well, which follows straight on from Trail of the White Worm, and the reason why I re-listened to that was because it'd been so long since I'd listened to that I didn't want to just jump into this one because I'd probably get super confused. Jeffrey Beavers is good in this, as is Tom and Leela, but I think what really threw me off and really annoyed me, or not annoyed me, but got me, yeah, a little bit cheesed off and a little bit, not even unsettled, but a bit annoyed, yeah, was the fact that there were so many different androids that it started to get a bit too convoluted to a point where it became a bit annoying, really. The Kroll are sound a bit too much like the Sontarans. You know, I think there's nothing. I listened to this episode yesterday, but I can't even really remember a lot of it. You know, Unit's in it, which is pretty cool. Gives it a very Jumper Tweet-esque vibe, which is odd because, again, I think the first episode says that these episodes should be set, chronologically speaking, after Talons of Wang-Chiang, so that's kind of weird. Yeah, it's a sort of spiritual successor and/or sequel to... No, it's a sequel to Android Invasion, which, if you're a fan of that story, then ideally you'll be a fan of this one. It's got Jeffrey Beavers in it as well, so it's kind of like, as well, I think, set around after... after Deadly Assassin as well in the Master's timeline, which is a bit weird because obviously Peter Pratt plays the Master in that one, but then again, Peter Pratt and Jeffrey Beavers are basically in the same prosthetic to the point where most people, and it is said in the context of the show that they're the same incarnation pretty much, even if they are played by two different actors. But so yeah, it's set after Deadly Assassin. In terms of the Master, Tom Baker's good in this as always. Yeah, and Tom Baker and Jeffrey Beavers as a pairing really work well in this, which is saying something considering I don't think I got that impression from what I remember of Keeper of Traken. Then again, it's been a long time since I watched that episode. I think in contrast to how Jeffrey Beavers plays his Master in, say, Light at the End, in both Trail of the White Worm and the Osiren Adventure, it's a lot more sort of toned down, a lot more sort of almost Roger Delgado-esque, which is good because obviously he is, to most people, myself included, the definitive Master. But I think I'm used to his Master being a lot more sort of, like, manipulative and calculating, and a bit more maybe like sort of aggressive and angry and a bit more mad. But here he plays it a lot more menacing and calculating and that, like Roger Delgado. But I think then again, in the context of Light at the End, he was attacking not only one Doctor, but he was attacking like all the classic series Doctors, incarnations, so he had to have this megalomaniac like ego and all massive sort of plan and be unhinged and mad, and he was very much let loose in terms of being the bad guy. And in that story as well, he's the point of focus in terms of being the bad guy, whereas here he has the Kroll, and it's very much, as I said before in my review that when I recorded that yesterday, it's very much that he is using the Kroll, spoiler alert, and that as a diversion even, and then does his Master thing. So it's balancing both the Kroll and the Master, and I think I would have just preferred to see the Master basically rather than the Kroll is what I'm getting at personally. But if you're a fan of Android Invasion, then you might like this because it's, as I say, a sequel to that, but otherwise you might just want the Master. You get a bit of Master action and or stuff and appearance in Trail of the White Worm, but that's not until sort of part 2 and the back end of part 2, and then by beginning of Osiren Adventure, you get more on the Kroll and then the Master, so it's finding that balance. And again, in the previous story with Trail of the White Worm, you get quite a bit with the worm as well. So, overall though, I think it's a really good series, and the two standout sort of stories for me would be the Wrath of the Iceni and Energy of the Daleks, because I'm a big fan of the Daleks, and what's not to like about them really. And I think it's a nice contrast going from the past in episode 3, pure historical, to then the present day with the Daleks, one of the Doctor Who's greatest enemies of sorts. And then surprisingly enough, although a lot of people have criticised these two for not being the best, I think they're fairly decent. I prefer Trail of the White Worm. This one does dip down. Osiren Adventure I would give a 6 out of 10. One of the weaker ones. Unfortunately, the weakest two for me would be Destination Nova and Osiren Adventure, or the Osiren Adventure. But overall, I would recommend the first series of the Fourth Doctor Adventure series. So yeah, thanks for watching, comment, rate and subscribe.